The day I moved in with my husband, his mother handed me a list of rules, including no cooking without my supervision. My husband nodded. I turned around and said, "Then I hope you like takeout, because I don't cook for strangers." Her jaw dropped. You can tell a lot about a person by how they treat you when they think they're in charge. I learned that the hard way. On the day I moved into my husband's family home. My name's Cassidy Blake. I'm 37 years old. Born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina, where the tea is sweet, the summers are b'artal, and people will bless your heart right before tearing you apart. I'm a freelance interior designer, mostly small spaces and DIY remodels for people who can't afford those shiny shows on TV. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I built it up from scratch after getting laid off from a soul-sucking office job in my 20s, and I wasn't about to apologize for not having a real 9-to-5. I met Owen Mitchell at a friend's ugly Christmas sweater party. He was wearing a sweater so hideous it blinked. I spilled spiked cider down the front of it 5 minutes after walking in. He laughed, offered me a fresh cup, and said, "Well, guess we're stuck with each other now." And somehow we were. Owen was easy, chill, the kind of guy who let things roll off his back. At first, it was a relief. After a lifetime of walking on eggshells around complicated people, being with someone who never seemed to pick a fight felt like breathing after holding your breath too long. But over time, I started noticing cracks in the calm. Like how he shut down whenever his mom, Deborah, was around. Or how he laughed nervously when she made sharp little jabs at me. Or how he always found reasons to smooth things over instead of standing up for either of us. When Owen proposed, I thought, maybe it'll get better. People change. Families adjust. Love fixes things. Right? 3 months later, I was standing in the driveway of the Mitchell family home, a big, old, sprawling place in the suburbs of Charlotte, with a car full of my life packed into boxes. Owen and I had decided, he suggested, and I reluctantly agreed, to stay there, temporarily, until we found our own place. Temporary. Sure. I barely had a chance to pull my suitcase out of the trunk before Deborah appeared on the porch. Perfectly pressed slacks. Perfectly frosted hair. Perfectly tight smile. She came down the steps holding a sheet of paper like it was a royal decree. I barely had time to brace myself before she handed it over. "These are the house rules," she said briskly. "It's important we're all on the same page." I blinked at the paper. Rules. In my 30s. I skimmed the list. Curfew expectations. Laundry schedules. Parking arrangements. And then, in bold letters, "No cooking without my supervision." I looked up. Deborah beamed at me like she had just gifted me the 10 Commandments. I turned to Owen, expecting, hoping, praying he would say something. Anything. He scratched the back of his neck awkwardly and said, "Yeah, babe, it's just, you know how she is. It's her kitchen." Like that explained everything. Like that made it okay. I smiled. Slow and sweet. The kind of smile my mother used to call trouble in a pretty dress. I folded the paper neatly, handed it back to Deborah, and said, in a voice as bright and chipper as hers, "Then I hope you like takeout, because I don't cook for strangers." The look on her face was worth every minute of awkward silence that followed. Her mouth dropped open. Owen coughed awkwardly. Somewhere inside the house, the grandfather clock chimed, loud and final. I grabbed my suitcase, slung my bag over my shoulder, and walked right past both of them into the house. Not another word. Because sometimes silence is louder than any shouting match. You think you know what you're walking into when you marry someone. You think love will be enough. Turns out, sometimes love isn't the hard part. Sometimes it's everything and everyone that comes with it. My name's Cassidy Blake, 37 years old, born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. I run my own little interior design business, nothing fancy, but enough to keep a roof over my head and my pride intact. I met Owen Mitchell at a Christmas party 2 years ago. He was easy to talk to, funny without trying too hard. The kind of guy who texted back when he said he would, who showed up when he promised he would. After a few bad breakups, Owen felt like a relief. He was steady, safe. We dated for a little over a year before he proposed. No big production, just him, me, and a ring tucked into a paper coffee cup because he knew I hated anything flashy. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that felt like enough. The plan was simple. After the wedding, we'd stay with his parents for a few months, just until we saved a little extra for a down payment. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I told myself it was temporary. Manageable. Just a few months. I could survive anything for a few months. The day we pulled into the driveway, my car loaded down with everything I owned, Owen squeezed my hand. "It'll be fine," he said. I nodded, even though my stomach was already twisting itself into knots. Because his mother, Deborah Mitchell, had a reputation. The kind of woman who could KLL a conversation with a single arched eyebrow. The kind of woman who thought, bless your heart, was a socially acceptable way to call you an idiot. She was waiting on the porch when we pulled in. Arms crossed. Smile tight. The breeze barely ruffled her perfectly styled hair. I stepped out of the car, brushing dust off my jeans, forcing a smile. Hi, Deborah, I said. She didn't even bother with hello. She just walked right up, handed me a piece of paper, and said, house rules. Like I was moving into a boarding school. I blinked at the paper in my hand. It wasn't a short list. Curfew by 11 on weekdays. Laundry on Saturdays only. No guests without permission. And then, bolded and underlined, no cooking without my supervision. I stared at the words. Felt the blood rushing in my ears. Surely this was a joke. I looked up at Owen, expecting him to laugh it off, to tell his mom to back off. But he just scratched the back of his neck, looking everywhere but at me. You know how she is, he mumbled. That was the moment. The exact second I realized I was alone in this. That if I didn't stand up for myself right now, it was going to be like this forever. I smiled. Not a polite smile. Not a submissive smile. A smile my sister used to call my, watch me burn it all down smile. I folded the paper neatly, held it out between two fingers like it was something I didn't want to touch, and said, sweet as pie, then I hope you like takeout. Because I don't cook for strangers. Deborah's mouth fell open. She looked like she'd just been slapped with a wet fish. Owen coughed, one of those awkward little chokes he did when he didn't know which side to pick. The air between us went tight and still. For a second, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then I grabbed my duffel bag out of the trunk, slung it over my shoulder, and walked right past them into the house. The front door creaked a little when I pushed it open. Inside, the house was exactly what you'd expect, spotless, stiff, full of expensive furniture no one was allowed to sit on. It smelled like lemon cleaner and judgment. I set my bag down by the stairs, took a deep breath, and turned around just as Owen and Deborah came in behind me. Deborah's heels clicked sharply on the tile. She opened her mouth, probably to fire off round two, but Owen beat her to it. Mom, he said, his voice low and tight, maybe we should give Cassidy a minute. Deborah's eyes narrowed. But for once, she said nothing. Just huffed, turned on her heel, and disappeared into the kitchen. Owen turned to me, hands shoved into his pockets. You didn't have to, I cut him off with a look. I did. He shifted, uncomfortable. It's her house. I shrugged. Then maybe we shouldn't have moved into it. He had no answer for that. I dragged my bag upstairs to the guest room, already feeling the walls closing in around me. This wasn't a home. It was a battlefield. And I had just fired the first shot. Dinner that night was tense. The kind of tense where the air feels heavier than it should. Deborah served roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans, all placed meticulously at the center of the table like it was a magazine shoot. No one spoke for the first few minutes. Just the quiet clink of silverware against china and Owen's occasional nervous clearing of his throat. I chewed slowly, forcing the food down past the knot in my stomach. Halfway through the meal, Deborah finally broke the silence. You know, she said, dabbing at her mouth with a cloth napkin, in this house, we respect traditions. I didn't look up from my plate. That's so, I said mildly. Yes, she said sharply. We believe in certain standards. Certain roles. I set my fork down carefully. Met her eyes across the table. And what role would that be exactly? I asked. She smiled. Thin. Cold. The role of a respectful daughter-in-law. Owen shifted uncomfortably beside me. I waited, gave him a full 5 seconds to step in. He didn't. Of course he didn't. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms over my chest. I respect people who earn it, I said. Deborah's eyes flashed. She opened her mouth, probably to scold me like I was one of her country club juniors, but I cut her off. And by the way, I added, reaching for my glass of water, I don't recall asking to cook here. Your kitchen's safe. The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. After dinner, Owen and I went upstairs. He closed the bedroom door behind us with a soft click. Did you have to say that? He asked quietly. I turned, staring at him. You mean stand up for myself? He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. You're making this harder than it has to be. I laughed. Sharp. Tired. No, Owen. Your mother's making it harder than it has to be. I'm just refusing to roll over and let her run me. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The silence stretched between us. Uncomfortable. Ugly. That night, lying in the too-stiff guest bed, Staring at the ceiling, I realized something important. I wasn't in a marriage. I was in a war. A quiet one. A polite one. But a war all the same. And if Owen wasn't going to fight for me, I'd have to decide if I was willing to fight alone. The next morning was worse. Deborah greeted me in the kitchen with a too bright smile and a good morning that sounded more like a dare. I poured myself coffee, sipped it in silence. She fluttered around the kitchen, humming tunelessly. And when I reached for the toaster, she gasped. "Careful," she cried. "That's an antique." I froze, stared at the beat-up toaster like it was a live grenade. Owen shuffled in a few minutes later, blinking blearily. Deborah pounced. "Owen," she said sweetly, "maybe Cassidy should leave the appliances alone until she's more familiar with the house." I didn't say a word, just set my coffee cup down carefully, picked up my bag, and walked out the door. Outside, the air was cool and sharp, smelling faintly of rain. I didn't have a plan. I just walked. Past the manicured hedges and trimmed lawns, past the rows of houses that all looked the same, until I found a little park with a rickety bench under a gnarled oak tree. I sat down, breathed, tried to remember who I was before I tried to fit myself into someone else's idea of good enough. I sat on that splintery bench longer than I meant to. Watched a golden retriever chase a tennis ball across the grass. Watched a little kid throw a tantrum when his mom said it was time to leave. Watched a whole life happening, messy and loud and unapologetic, while I sat there trying to remember the last time I felt like I belonged anywhere. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Owen." I let it ring. Let it buzz again. And again. Finally, I picked up. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. His voice was tight. Worried. But mostly about himself, about how it looked, about what his mother was probably saying about me vanishing after breakfast. I didn't answer right away. Just listened to the wind moving through the trees above me. Finally, I said I needed air. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Mom's upset." I closed my eyes. Of course she was. It was always about how Deborah felt. How Deborah looked. How Deborah suffered. Never about how I felt. "I'll be back later," I said, and hung up before he could say anything else. When I got back, the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that feels like a trap. I found Owen in the living room, sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch. Deborah was nowhere to be seen, but I could feel her presence thick in the air like humidity before a storm. "Hey," Owen said, standing up awkwardly. "Listen, can we just try to make this easier?" I dropped my bag by the door. "Easier for who?" I asked. He hesitated. "You know how she is," he said. I smiled, not nicely. "I know exactly how she is," I said. "What I don't know is why you're more worried about her feelings than mine." He rubbed his hands over his face, pacing a little. "It's complicated, Cass." I laughed, sharp and humorless. "It's not complicated," I said. "It's just inconvenient." He stopped pacing, stared at me. "You're asking me to pick between you and my mom," he said finally, accusingly. "No," I said quietly. "I'm asking you to pick yourself. To grow up." He flinched. But he didn't argue. Because deep down, he knew I was right. That night, we barely spoke. I went upstairs early, curled up under the two stiff guest bed covers, staring at the ceiling fans spinning slow. Owen stayed downstairs. Probably talking to Deborah. Probably letting her rewrite the story until I was the villain who didn't appreciate family. I thought about packing my bag. About calling my sister and asking if her couch was free. About leaving quietly, without a big fight or a dramatic goodbye. Just slipping away before I lost more of myself in this house that wasn't a home. But some stubborn part of me stayed. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was hope. Or maybe I just wasn't ready to give up without making it very clear that I wasn't the problem. The next morning, Deborah was waiting for me in the kitchen. Like a snake coiled and ready to strike. She had a fresh list in her hand. Longer than the first. New rules. New demands. New expectations. She thrust it toward me without a word. I didn't even look at it. Just smiled sweetly. Reached into my bag. Pulled out a printed lease. Because while she was drafting new rules, I was at the library downtown, signing a rental agreement for a tiny one-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop. I laid the lease on the kitchen counter. Slid it across the polished marble toward her. "Thanks for the hospitality," I said. But I found my own place. Deborah's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. I turned on my heel. And for once, she didn't stop me. Because she couldn't. Because you can't control someone who's already decided they're not playing your game. I was halfway up the stairs, heart pounding but steady, when I heard Owen calling after me. "Cassidy, wait." I didn't stop. Didn't slow down. I heard him scrambling up the stairs behind me, catching up just as I stepped into the guest room. He shut the door behind him with a soft click. "You're moving out?" he asked, like he couldn't quite believe it. I kept packing, folding my clothes into my duffel bag with neat, careful movements. "Yeah," I said without looking at him. He stood there, helpless. "I thought we were gonna work through this," he said. I zipped the bag closed. Finally turned to face him. "Work through what, Owen?" I said, voice low but steady. "Me being treated like a tenant in my own marriage? You standing there saying nothing every time your mom takes a shot at me." He flinched. "You're overreacting," he muttered. I laughed, sharp and humorless. "No," I said. "I'm reacting exactly enough." He crossed the room, reaching for my hand. I stepped back. "I love you," he said desperately. I looked at him for a long moment. "I believe you," I said. "But sometimes love isn't enough." He shook his head, his hands falling helplessly to his sides. This is just a rough patch." I smiled, sad and soft. "Rough patches don't come with rule books, Owen." I slung my bag over my shoulder and brushed past him. Down the stairs, through the too quiet living room. Out the front door. Deborah stood in the kitchen doorway, watching me leave, arms folded, a satisfied look on her face. She thought she won. She thought she got rid of me. But the truth? She just set me free. The sky was bright and blue, the air sharp with early spring. I tossed my bag in the back seat of my car, slid behind the wheel, and sat there for a second. Breathing. Just breathing. Feeling lighter than I had in months. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A message from Owen. "I'm sorry. Please come back. We can fix this." I stared at it. For a long, long minute. Then I locked the screen and set the phone face down. Because the thing no one tells you is, sometimes walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's choosing yourself. And that's the bravest thing you can do. I started the car. Pulled out of the driveway. Didn't look back. Didn't need to. Some places you leave behind for good. Some lessons you only have to learn once. The apartment above the coffee shop wasn't much. Barely big enough to turn around in. A tiny kitchen that smelled faintly of roasted beans and cinnamon. A bathroom where the water heater whined like a cranky old man. But it was mine. Every dented wall, every creaky floorboard, every chipped tile, mine. I set my bag down in the middle of the room. Stood there for a second, just breathing. And smiled. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for permission to feel at home. I was already there. The first few days were quiet. Not lonely. Just still. Peaceful. I unpacked slowly. Hung up fairy lights around the windows. Threw an old quilt over the second-hand couch. Picked up a tiny cactus from the shop downstairs and named it Fred. I got coffee every morning from the shop below, the barista learning my order before the week was out. Started taking long walks through the neighborhood in the evenings, hands stuffed into my pockets, watching the world move around me. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't perfect. But it was real. And it was mine. Owen texted a few times. Always late at night. "I miss you. I'm sorry. It doesn't feel right without you here." I read them. Every single one. And every single time, I put my phone back down without replying. Because missing me now didn't undo the months he spent letting me stand alone. Because love without respect isn't love. It's possession. And I was done being owned. A few weeks later, I ran into him. Of all places, at the grocery store. He looked thinner. Tired. Older somehow. He spotted me by the produce section, hesitated, then walked over. "Hey," he said, voice low. "Hey," I said back. There was an awkward pause. He glanced at my basket, bread, soup, a bottle of cheap wine, and gave a sad little smile. "You look good," he said. I smiled politely. "You look." I trailed off. Didn't finish. Didn't need to. He knew. "I'm sorry," he said again, voice rough. "I know," I said simply. He shifted, looked down at his shoes. "I thought if I kept the peace, everything would work itself out," he said. I shrugged. "It did," I said. He looked up sharply. Saw that I meant it. That I wasn't bitter. Wasn't angry. Just done. "I hope you're happy," he said finally. I thought about it for a second. Let the truth settle in my chest. "I am," I said. And I meant it. Really, truly meant it. We said goodbye in the canned goods aisle. No drama. No tears. Just two people finally understanding they were better off apart. After that grocery store run-in, Owen stopped texting. Stopped calling. Stopped trying. And honestly, it was a relief. Because sometimes the worst part of leaving isn't the leaving itself. It's the slow, dragging weight of hope, the tiny, stubborn part of you that keeps asking, what if? But now there was no more what if. Only what is. And what it was peace. I threw myself into my work. Picked up a few small clients. Helped an elderly couple redecorate their sunroom. Designed a nursery for a single mom expecting twins. Spent long afternoons sketching at the little park down the street. Life grew bigger, brighter, fuller. Not all at once, but day by day, step by step, breath by breath. About 6 months after I moved out, I got a message from one of Owen's cousins, a woman I'd only met once at a barbecue, who'd slipped me her number, just in case. Hey, heard about everything. Just wanted you to know. Deborah's making Owen's life miserable. She's worse than ever now that you're gone. I stared at the message for a long second. Smiled a little. Not mean. Not cruel. Just peaceful. Because that was always the deal with people like Deborah. They don't hate you because you're bad. They hate you because you're free. Because you chose yourself when they tried to convince you that you had no choice at all. A week later, I passed by the old Mitchell house on my way to a client meeting. It looked the same from the outside. Manicured lawn. Perfect shutters. Fake smiles. But there was something brittle about it now. Something hollow. A house full of rules and cold dinners and tight smiles that didn't reach anyone's eyes. A house I had outgrown. A life I had outgrown. I didn't slow down. Didn't stop. Just drove past, windows down, music up, the spring air warm and soft against my skin. Breathing easy. Laughing at nothing. Living fully. Some people spend their whole lives trying to win approval they never needed. Begging for scraps of love that was supposed to be unconditional. I wasn't one of them anymore. I had walked away. I had chosen peace. And that was the sweetest revenge of all.